Research tells us that many change initiatives fail. Are there common reasons for this?
Well, first of all, over 70% of change initiatives fail. That is exactly what research tells us. And you have to dig into it because the dice are loaded against us. I know when I release that fact to chief executives or senior directors, I mean, they sort of look at me aghast. But that's the truth. Now, the number one reason is woolly statements around vision and goals. This is woolly stuff that people don't understand. I've had so many chief executives trying to explain their vision to me, and it's full of mumble. It's full of business school speak. It's not in any way crisp or in any way memorable or indeed exciting. It's just boring. So, and certainly people further in the organisation are really not going to get it. And how does that make it different from today? So this whole business of vision and goals has to be really clear and crisp. That's absolutely number one. I think number two is lack of conviction. I, for my sins, spend a lot of time at conferences, whether I'm actually giving a speech or I'm in the audience listening to speeches. And if you can't sell your vision or goals or your new organisation and your new strategic model to yourselves, you aren't going to sell it to anybody else. And I watch people mumbling their way through a series of dull and mind-bendingly boring PowerPoint presentations where there's just no passion. The person isn't speaking. It's the PowerPoint chart. Frankly, if they set it up there and put it on automatic, it would have exactly the same impact than the chief executive standing there mumbling his or her way through these charts. You probably don't need PowerPoint charts. You need to just stand there and talk passionately, logically, intelligently about your vision and your goals so that you can demonstrate you absolutely care about what you're doing. And that's not just you as the chief executive. That's every director, every senior person in the business has to be able to talk passionately to demonstrate this conviction to change. I think the next point is the whole area of communication. Because most communication in most organizations, the noise comes from the top and tries to get down through the iceberg. And it won't happen. It has to be taken down by the leadership team, by the talent in the organisation. Very, very little comes up, and increasingly little goes horizontally. And that's partly over what's happened in the last 3 years. Pressure comes in an organisation, people go into their silos, back into their rabbit holes, and they stay there because that's safe. So the whole alignment thing gets broken. They purely work within their teams. We're okay, so if we keep doing what we're meant to do, it'll be all right, won't it? Well, actually, it needs to move on a horizontal basis. The alignment needs to get fixed. And the way of fixing alignment is to open up communications. Communications have to be very strong across the business. So quite often the whole communication thing will break down, and you have to spend a lot of time working with that. Lack of involvement, I think, and ownership is the next one that I would talk about. Change starts off with the chief executive and his or her team, but very, very quickly they have to transfer that ownership and involvement for change further into the organisation. They just simply can't do it themselves. So the plan for change has to incorporate many levels of the organisation to get it across. You'll not get this by sending an email to everybody, or even worse, sending your PowerPoint charts to everybody, or even calling them all to one conference. That will not do it. There's a number of things that has to happen. I think my next point, I call it the resistances to change. They're always in every organisation, any organisation I've ever worked in or worked with. Resistance to change. It lives quite high. If it's not in the boardroom, it's one level outside it. And just recently, I was having this conversation and said to a chief executive, how many of the people that report to you, your direct reports, all 12 of them, how many on a 1 to 5 scale, where 5 is excellent, would be completely committed to the change that you're doing? And he looked at me for a moment and he said, when we went round the chart, we got 4. So 4 out of 12, a third of your board are committed to what you're trying to do. And the rest of the conversation, we actually got down to levels of 2 and 3. So the resistance to change, even within that room, was considerable. Well, can you imagine what it's going to be like outside that room? So these are the elephants in the room. They have to be identified early. We have to be honest about them. Quite often people talking truth to power is not easy. And just because they disagree with it doesn't mean to say they're wrong. They may have seen something that you haven't. This whole business of dissent is a very important aspect within business. And if you trust the people and respect them, and the fact that you've got them in your organisation and they report to you, I would assume that you trust and respect them. They're probably seeing something you're not seeing. And it's important that you are alert visually and orally to what they are seeing. So resistance to change is a big one and needs an awful lot of debate and openness and honesty. And quite often politically people are scared to say things because we know what happens, they get removed. And that is dangerous. If you've got a chief executive who he or she doesn't listen and they just want to impose their view, you don't have a chief executive, you have a king. And that's probably not what you're trying to do. So the behaviour of the chief executive from a leadership perspective is absolutely key. I think the next point where some organisations fail, and it's associated with the communication, is getting facts out there. You know, we have, every organisation is a grapevine, and grapevine never carries anything positive, and it never carries facts. So if you plug the facts into the grapevine, that kills the cynics, because the facts speak for themselves. Facts are friendly. Even if facts are telling us that this is not working, that's the truth. And consequently, we're going to do something to make it work. So we're not trying to give you some spin that we get from government ministers on any topic any day. In organisations, we can't afford that. So getting the facts out there, communicating the short-term wins. Once things are starting, the new shoots of the new organisation are starting to emerge, take the pictures of them, get those short-term wins out there, reward people, recognise people that this is new world. They are achieving new things, this is what we need. They're achieving it in this way, and therefore this is the behaviour that we need, and you need to reward it and recognise it. Certainly, I think finally is, I do see people heralding victory too early. And that can be dangerous, because you almost take the objective, you almost get there. It's a bit like celebrating halfway through the last lap of a marathon. And before you know it, everybody has just passed you, because you've celebrated too early. So you need to make it stick. Don't pop the corks in the champagne bottles before those models are well and truly embedded, and you know it's embedded, so it can't unwind itself. And I think the final point, and it's probably the biggest point really in some of this, is not confronting the cultural aspects. People don't like to talk about culture. Accountants hate it because it's not an asset that sits on a balance sheet and they can value it or depreciate it and all of that. It's there, it's huge, it's in your organisation, it's how you do business. And unless you have the culture you need to deliver the future, you will not deliver it. So you have to spend time measuring it, discussing it. Leadership has a huge amount to play in how do we want to do things in the future. It will be potentially the rock that the good ship change will founder on, or it could be the foundation for the new building of the future. But it's within your control. Customers don't touch it. Well, they do touch it on a daily basis, but they have no impact on it, and the competitors have no impact on it. This is something you do to yourself, and therefore it is within your gift to actually get it right, and it constantly moves. It's like a glacier, it constantly moves. You need to make sure it's moving the right way.